You're listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review. I'm your host, Aaron, and here with me is my co-host, Adam. How you doing, Adam?
Yeah, I'm good, Aaron. I'm good. It's going to be interesting, this discussion we're going to have today, isn't it? We've got a lot to cover.
Special episode here. It's not a movie review. We're doing something different.
Yeah.
Something new and different. Today we're going to be talking about the U.S. presidential election. That's kind of like the kicking off point, but there's so many interesting tangents and facets to this that I haven't heard really much of anybody talk about this issue in the way that I think we're going to tonight, Adam. So I'm very excited about this.
Yeah. Obviously, this is probably your number one trending topic on the internet right now for obvious reasons. You know, this is... Yeah, I mean, we've never seen an election like this in history, I don't think. And everybody, and from, you know, the sort of fringes of the alternative media right through the mainstream media is talking about this, and for good reason. And there are so many different things to talk about, so many different aspects and facets of it to discuss. But yeah, I agree. I think that the angle that we're going to be taking is probably going to be unique, you know, compared to a lot of the dialogue out there, because most of what we're looking at the moment, and again, this goes for both the mainstream and the alternative media, is really just a kind of a critique of one candidate, i.e. Hilary or Trump, and then a sort of a promotion of the other. It's most of the dialogue is just like pro-Trump, anti-Hilary, or pro-Hilary, anti-Trump, or what have you.
Yeah. Which one are you going to vote for? And which of the other one is more corrupt than the other? It's like, what side could out corrupt the other side's politician more, you know what I mean?
Well, this was the most fascinating thing, and we talked about this via email, Aaron, is that in the very last presidential debate, so this one that happened about a week ago, you know, I tend to think that Hilary probably won that, simply because she is more skilled, and she was more skilled in handling the objections and the criticisms. You know, so she was good at, you know, basically diverting attention away from things, minimizing, sublimating, equivocating. You know, these types of things, which comes from, of course, you know, a whole career in, you know, law and politics. You know, that's what they do. Oh, yeah. So it's interesting that when we look at the fact that, you know, Hilary probably won that, she won it after she had been convicted in the court of public opinion as somebody who was corrupt and most probably treasonous. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting to look at it just on that note there. When we you know, that the winner of the debate was first, you know, exposed as being corrupt and you know, possibly treasonous, at the least. You know, it's like, it says something about the level of the candidates you've got there, you know.
It's almost unbelievable, the level to which this has gotten. Each year, the presidential election gets worse and worse. Really, I mean, to me, the turning point for elections really getting crazy, and I guess you could certainly go back further, but I'd say like the 2000 one with Gore and Bush, and the big controversy over, you know, oh, Gore actually won, but Bush stole the votes in Florida, and now lo and behold, that same kind of narrative is built up today, where before the election is even over, we're talking about stealing votes, and, you know, the election's just going to be rigged. And this point leads me into what I think Donald Trump is doing, because again, if we're talking about the main sort of mainstream dialogue on this topic, it's like, oh yeah, who's gonna win, Hillary or Trump? But to me, that's I've been trying to like think about this for a while. I'm like, okay, it's like, does Trump really? Is he serious about this? And is he in it to win it? Or is he doing this for ulterior motives? And at this point, I've kind of solidified my opinion that, like, no, he to me, I don't think he cares about winning the presidential election at all. That's not what this is about. It never has been. But no, we'll get into that in a second. What do you think about who will win and all that stuff yourself?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. I mean, it swung back and forth, over the past year, and especially over the past month or so. I mean, there was a time when I think Trump was in the lead. I think by a small margin, maybe a point or two.
It's hard to tell. It goes back and forth, and it depends on like what poll you're listening to. It depends really on what cable news channel you're watching. To be quite honest, who's winning and who isn't.
It does, but I mean, obviously, it's far be it from me to actually make a solid prediction. But I mean, it looked like after the most recent and the last debate, again about a week ago, Hilary was in the lead, and she maintained that lead. And it looked like
I agree.
It looked like it was a given, basically. However, since that time, we have had further developments in this whole email scandal. So it came out a couple of days ago that the FBI has actually reopened the case, or reopened the investigation at least, into these, this classified handling of, handling of classified information on, private home servers, which is in breach of government protocols, blah, 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 blah. And that, it made me think about how I perceived the debate at the time, because I was thinking to myself, well, okay, Hilary is in the lead here. She looks to have won this debate, and so it's probably going to be a relatively easy win for her, unless there's something comes out of left field and there's some kind of wild card, some kind of new development, and lo and behold, a week later, this investigation gets reopened into new revelations about these emails, and I'm not saying that this is actually going to tip it. And
I don't think it's going to go anywhere, because, I mean, how many of these things, this just keeps happening over and over again. And see, here, to me, okay, now I'll just lay it out there right here. I'll say that I have a very hard time believing that Donald Trump has any way of winning at all. I think he's going to lose. I think Hillary Clinton's going to win. And I think both sides want it that way, oddly enough. You wouldn't think that on the surface, but there's a reason why. Let's try to break this down. Like, see, look, with the Hillary email scandal, that makes her evil and corrupt, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And therefore, she's the perfect enemy to the right wing. Mm-hmm. And so, meanwhile, the right wing wants Donald Trump to win in the worst way. They're propping him up. We're like, we're doing everything we can. He's got all the numbers behind him. He would win if it wasn't a rigged election anyway. Oh. So you see what the right wing is doing. They're already admitting defeat there. They're like, yeah, our candidate's going to lose, and it's because the election's rigged. And look, the president's going to come in. It's going to be Hillary. She's going to be the most corrupt president ever. And we're going to be there to fight back, because it should have been Donald Trump. But don't worry, Donald Trump isn't going anywhere. I'll just stop right there. What do you have to say about this insanity, Adam?
Yeah. I mean, I can see that. I can definitely see that. And when I was talking about the reopening of these investigations into Hillary, I wasn't necessarily saying that I think this is going to tip it in Trump's favor. But it's interesting because it creates more drama. It creates I think it probably gives the Trump supporters a sense of hope that they might win. And I think this is probably part of the grand game that's being played out here, in terms of getting people to buy into all this, But I mean, what you just said reminded me of something that we talked about a few years ago, and I can't remember exactly on what show this was on, but we were basically talking about how it looked as if the broader conspiracy media or alternative media, so we're talking about people like Alex Jones and others of his ilk, basically going more mainstream, and going mainstream to the point where they perhaps become political leaders in some kind of fashion. I'm not exactly... we didn't go into any details as to exactly how that would all come about, but I remember we sort of agreed that this is where it was going, that we were going to see people like Alex Jones, people who are kind of on the right-wing side of conspiracy media, rising to mainstream prominence, generating, creating a larger audience, becoming politically more mainstream, and developing some kind of vague political manifesto. And so this is basically what we've seen, and I agree in saying that I think Trump is in some way part of this, and it's not necessarily about winning the election, but it's about creating a broader sort of political movement that encapsulates
Yep.
Right-wing demographics and the what was previously referred to as the alternative media or conspiracy demographics. You know,
and for Trump, it is exploiting that market. I'll just say that quickly. That's all he cares about.
Yeah. Well, he's
using that. He's using it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's a reality
himself.
TV star. I mean, quite clearly a narcissist, someone who has been all about number one in his career, and you know, the whole
from day one.
Yeah. Well, the whole notion of this reality TV show that he did, you know, The Apprentice and whatever else he did was all about him. It was all about him being in the power seat and telling people that they're fired and that they're stupid and they're ugly and all this type of stuff, you know. And so, I mean, that really tells you what kind of a person he is. And I think what we're seeing now is just a continuation of that. I mean, this is if you look at the election and the way that the whole kind of sentiment and the aesthetic and the vibe of the whole thing has come across, it is almost like a extended dramatic reality TV show. You know, where Donald Trump is getting up there and saying Hillary's a disaster, crooked Hillary, and you're fired, Hillary, and it's just like
he's coming up with like the funniest one-liners to get people laughing at home, and it works. And of course, he's at the same time he's like a comedian, you know, because he's like taking jabs at the system.
Yeah.
You know, he's like he's honest, right? This is a big thing people say about him is, well, he's so honest. He just says whatever he thinks. Yeah. And to me, it's not even honesty. It's just like a trick he uses to get people to think that he is honest. You know what I mean? It's just a trick of the light that people aren't seeing. It's like, oh yeah, he's honest. No, he's just a showman. He's putting on a show for you because that's what he's been doing. And since the beginning of this, I've been saying that, yeah, Trump is a celebrity first and foremost. Definitely before him being a businessman. He's a celebrity businessman. He's the famous real estate tycoon from New York. And he's been cultivating this image for decades and decades now. He's been in the public eye forever. He's been building the Trump brand up. And it literally is that. I mean, you go by his big properties, his name is emblazoned on them. You know, like across the world, they see Trump. So it's a brand. So to me, just this whole political race and starting out, I'm like, okay, yeah, it's just a way for him to build his brand. But I didn't think he was going to go as far as he did and be like the actual Republican nominee. And at that point, I was like, no, wait, is he actually serious about this? And I had to think about that. But with the later sort of revelations that come out in the past few weeks, I'm like, okay, no. He actually never cared about winning. It's always been about him building up himself. And he's exploiting this, this market being created of both mainstream and more certainly the alternative right. He's drawing them in, and he wants to build on that. And there's so many things to say about this.
Well, you know what it reminds me of? You know what it reminds me of is there's a statement by one of these famous occultists, and I can't remember whether it was Adam Weishaupt or was it possibly who was it? I'll have to look this one up and put it in the show notes if I can find it. But it's basically one of these secret society members was talking, and this is going back to the 1700s, I think, about how people are always given their leaders. How everybody, all cultures, everybody, all demographics are given their leaders, and the leaders will tell them what they want to hear. You know, and this is, I mean, when we're talking about Trump being honest, you know, and cutting through the BS and saying it like it is and calling a spade, you know, he's come out at a time when that's exactly what people want. You know, people have been,
yes, exactly.
People have been, awareness has been raised, shall we say, through the expansion of alternative and conspiracy media into the mainstream, that the system is corrupt. You know,
yes,
this has been going on for many, many years now. It's a slow acclimatization process of the general public being, basically. The alt media has succeeded. They've reached out to the masses and spreading their word of truth out there. So now everybody's all upset
at the system, the government in general. They don't really know what that means. They just know that everything's corrupt. They don't know what to do about it, but they know that people are screaming with red faces about it. And they're starting to look at them like, oh, this guy's had a red face for the longest. Maybe I should look at him.
Yeah, well, that's
who has the reddest face? Well, that's the guy I should listen to because he's the angriest guy. Well, he must know something.
It's the it's like the how can I put this? It's what you've got is these certain themes and memes and sentiments and ideas and just sort of vague feelings about the government, the establishment, the system spreading out into the mainstream. And again, they're very watered down. So, the general public have just got a very vague sense that it's corrupt, it's wrong, something needs to change, and as this all came to a head, well, look who pops up on the radar, Donald Trump.
you know what? The actual mainstream media billed this election as the anti-establishment election year.
Yeah, that's right.
They actually called it that on many occasions, and they're telling you like this is the anti-establishment year. So this is the year for this all to go big. Yeah. So of course. I mean, it's crazy.
It's that has been repeated on many other mainstream media sources as well. I mean, the BBC have been calling it that, at least on a couple of occasions. I've seen them call it the anti-establishment election. And what it reminds me of? It reminds me of something that David Icke said some years ago when he was questioned about this whole notion of 2012. What's happening in 2012? Is this thing actually real? Is there going to be some kind of revelation? And he said, well, I don't actually buy into that at all. But if you were to ask me to give a prediction, I would say that 2016 will be the year of great social awakening. And this is going back to like 2008, 2009. And of course, I suspect that David Icke is basically an establishment stooge of some sort, one form or another. And so, it makes me wonder as to, was he actually repeating information that he'd been given at some point? That this was going to be the year where certain sentiments reached boiling point, certain cultural narratives started merging together, and there was a broad, vague sense of anti-establishment sentiment, coming to prominence. So
we all have to realize that a huge market has been created for anti-establishment media. Anything branding itself as that is now gaining traction in the mainstream. Regular people want to get in on this, and more people are joining the movement, whatever that movement happens to be for whoever it is. And again, this broke a week or two ago. Somebody involved with Trump brought out this project idea for Trump TV, where it'd be some form of TV network or media platform of some kind that would have Trump's name on it. And it would obviously, carry on the torch of what he was trying to do in his failed presidential run. And so to me, this is like the moment for me where I was like, okay, yeah, all right. From the beginning, this is it. This is exactly what Trump wanted. He didn't care about winning the election. It actually would have been worse to win the election because then he would have had to actually be the president and do that. That's not what he's interested in. Is again building up his celebrity so he can just leech onto this thing and build his TV station so he can be the big guy that everybody puts their attention on. And the alt-right will flock to this. Alex Jones will probably have a show on this Trump TV if it ends up coming to fruition, which I feel like it probably will in some form. Alex Jones will be on there. And the fact that Hilary won the election actually is better for all of them. It would be worse if Trump would win, because it continues their narrative of, it's all rigged and the anti-establishment guy can't ever win because then
he's got to be the underdog.
Then he becomes the establishment. Yeah,
they've got it. And this is what most political movements are really based on. Is the the victim identity. Concept, and this is what I'm saying is it can only exist in opposition to something else.
Yes, exactly. If it becomes the establishment, it ceases to exist in its form.
Well,
so where does it go? It goes away.
Yeah, exactly. What's Alex Jones and red eye is going to complain about if Trump actually wins.
Yeah, exactly. That's what they want.
They're going to have to go back to 9/11 truth, which they obviously don't want to do.
Yeah.
So this is funny, and yeah.
It's crazy. I mean, again, just if you think about this from like a narrative point of view, it doesn't make sense at all. The only way it does make sense is that, the back and forth. Well, we have a Democrat for this long, then we have a Republican to let off steam for the Democrats, because the Republicans were building up their hatred of Obama for 8 years, and believe me, it is quite a lot of pent up aggression there, and now they won't have that release valve of having the Republican candidate in there. So this brings up a serious issue right here, is that you've got another Democrat in there that's even more crooked and way worse than Obama. And you've got this right wing that's all like charged up, just like ready to explode. What is going to happen to them? Of course, they're going to go with the guy who already has been exploding himself on air for years again. They're like, oh, this guy's exploding. Like this, he speaks to me. So they're going to join in the Alex Jones crowd. The Alex Jones crowd is going to be the establishment crowd anyway, in terms of the right wing, at least, because Donald Trump, the failed presidential nominee, is going to be on board on this. And then the mainstream and alternative right are just going to conglomerate into this big ball of hate, which is not. It's scary to think what might happen with this. Actually, I do not like where this is going one bit.
Well, yeah, it is unnerving. I mean, if we just get back to the idea of this Trump TV, I sort of was it actually a prospect that he himself has talked about? Was it who brought that to the fore?
It was somebody associated with Trump. I don't know if it was like one of his sons or it was some guy who already had some sort of ties to him through media. It was one of them, but it was like, yeah, we could make this thing happen. You know, it's just an idea we're floating right now.
Well, what's interesting is when we go back to that last presidential debate again, and toward the end of it, Trump was asked, will you accept the results of the election? Will you accept it? And he started, all of a sudden he was like, well, if it goes my way, I'll accept it. But if not, I'm going to contest it because it's a rigged system. So, and that struck me as being completely scripted and insincere when he said that. I didn't buy it at all. And I immediately thought of this Trump TV thing. And I think that this will be the launching off point for that new media enterprise, will be the contesting and challenging of the, voting results. Mm-hmm. After the election will be the thing that cements this whole new, it'll be like the pilot episode,
Yeah, it's a thing that stamps Donald Trump's credibility in the alternative too. It's like, look, he stood up and he told the truth.
Yeah.
He knew what was going to happen. He said it. Nobody listened. Now Alex Jones has to make a documentary about the history of election fraud, and you're going to learn all about it. You're scum. I hate you. Yeah. So that's what's going to happen. I can't wait for this. I'm going to be enlightened by this wonderful documentary.
Well, I'll tell you what.
Trump TV.
Well, look what happens to presidential candidates who believe that they'll be subject to election fraud or rigging or whatever it is. Look at Al Gore. His legend rose so much after the election. He became the spokesperson for globalism and liberalism and environmentalism, because of what happened in the election.
Yes, that's right. So he. Again, he gets real street cred from the people who liked him to begin with.
So
it's like, it worked out. So it couldn't have worked out better. Again, it would have been worse if he was president.
Exactly.
People don't see things that way.
Because when we had that election with Bush and Gore, it was there's strong. How can I put this? There was such a strong anti-Republican sentiment across the world, especially after 9/11 in Iraq. Everybody hated George Bush. Everybody hated him. They hated Republicans, and rightly so. But this just this further cemented the the credibility and again the legend of this martyr Al Gore, who tried to go up against the corrupt Republican gunslinging cowboy, and he didn't make it, but now he's going to come out with a new globalist liberal cause to take it to these evil dirty capitalists,
Yeah,
So we're just
that are
looking at
also, it's a crime family because Jeb Bush is down there in Florida, the state that rigged the election anyway. So
yeah.
it's it's got that whole thing
I mean,
going.
that whole thing gave rise to an entire generation of left-wing media pundits. Like Michael Moore would never have been anywhere near as famous as he is if it were not for that election, and if it were not for happened when 9/11 and Iraq and all that kind of stuff. You had the rise of these late-night kind of talk shows or variety shows or what have you. We talked about like Colbert and Bill Maher and
There's
who
still
else? Keith
traces of
Olbermann.
the hate George W. Bush silliness too, like the sort of punk rock. I'm a teenager that's mad. Like I'm gonna
Green
wear
Day.
a shirt that says George W. Bush is dumb, and I'm gonna think that's a political statement. That you will still sometimes see somebody wearing a shirt like that. It's like, oh wow, that lasted this long. For that guy, at least.
Well, that's going to be that's going to be revived now with Trump. I mean, Trump is just a continuation of that kind of sentiment. It'll Green Day can do another album called American Idiot, and it'll be just as relevant as it was when the first time they did it.
Yeah.
So
yeah. Oh gosh, it's crazy. I just it boggles my mind how people can fall for the Trump scam. Really, I mean, it's a scam. If you're talking about people in the alt media, it's like, what in the world are you doing? The only thing that makes sense is when people are just doing everything for the wrong reasons, and they're just being opportunistic. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. It's just a bunch of opportunistic charlatans. Either that or they're just bonehead idiots. It's like one or the other. It's like, really, you're supporting Donald Trump? You think that what in the world makes you think this is a good idea?
I think, and we should talk about this because I think that the most common sentiment that I've come across is that he represents a break from business as usual. So
sure,
and this is what I see. It's people are saying, well, it's not necessarily Trump I support. It's just more I don't support Hillary, and I will take anything that's different. So this guy's getting up there. He's talking about the corrupt establishment. He's calling her crooked. He's saying, he's going to take a tough stance on this, that, and the next thing. He's telling us that the media is a bit biased, and I think he even said in one instance that the media was brainwashing the American public. I had to look that up, but
sure,
I think he actually said that. And so people who are feeling disenfranchised, especially people from within alternative media circles and whatnot, are going to look at that and say, well, it's not that necessarily he's a great guy or that I support him, but I would rather support or at least be open to the idea of something different rather than just again the business.
Yeah, and
thing.
he's promoting the ideas that I've been trying to put out there all this time. He's doing it in an effective way because he's got a national platform here. So we got to get on board with this. So it's another example of alternative media just falling for the numbers games. Like, well, the thing that we need to do is get 500 million YouTube subscribers. That way, we get as many people watching our material as possible, and then we'll make videos about how the brainwashed masses are a bunch of idiots. Well, guess what, Dumbo? You got the brainwashed masses subscribed to you, and that was your goal. So what is it? You hate the masses, and you're going to make fun of them, or you're pronouncing yourself a prophet or some sort of wonderful person because you have a bajillion YouTube subscribers. What is it? You know what I mean?
I think opportunism, as you say, is a big part of this. And when we talk about the big names within alternative media, I think that's what it's about. People see this wave coming and they want to catch it. They want to get a piece of that. They see it as an opportunity to get more listeners, to get more subscribers, to basically promote their own platform and to become basically more famous. I think it's a big part of it.
That's the long and short of it. It kills me to see people falling for this and just buying right into this. But I mean, what are you gonna do? That's the way things are. You're flashy, you're loud, you say wacky stuff. People are gonna pay attention to that. So,
well, it's interesting to talk about how the conspiracy media or alternative media or truth movement or whatever you want to call it has kind of merged into this new thing, over the last few years. And this is something that has fascinated me, and I've been tracking it and analyzing it and whatnot for a while now. And how it ended up here, how it ended up to the point where the truth movement is now basically the Trump movement. It's like, how did we get here? And when I really think about it and deconstruct it, what I can see is a changing of narratives and memes over a period of years that have basically prepared the ground and familiarized people with certain concepts and sparked indignation and feelings of victimhood and resentment, and also I think just general feelings of community and purpose. Because I think what happened, as far as I can see, is that if we look at the alternative media and conspiracy movement, they really, I think, ground to a halt after 2012, because I guess the base of the alternative media was the 9/11 truth movement. That was the thing that it was that was your bedrock, right? So
yeah, I'll agree with that. Yeah, definitely.
And so all of the other topics kind of were peripheral in nature, more or less. 9/11 was the big one. That was what it all was centered around.
They kind of, you could say they kind of branched off from there. That was like the kickoff point for so many things. People started there, and based on their particular tastes or interests, they kind of branched off in different directions, but all from the same central point.
Yeah, so everybody had all these different, all these different movements and different interests, but they all had that in common. So again, that was kind of like your foundation. And nothing happened. Nothing at all.
Nothing good.
Well, nothing good happened. There was no new investigation. You got a few people like Charlie Sheen and whoever else, Roseanne Barr or Rosie O'Donnell, I can't remember which one it was, talking about this on national television. It kind of, the 9/11 truth meme kind of etched its way slowly into some mainstream circles, but it was promptly kicked out again once people realized how damaging it was to their careers.
It should be noted that those were deemed like major successes for the movement by the big names like Alex Jones. Those were like benchmark points for 9/11 truth for them. Is when some horrible celebrity, in the case of Charlie Sheen certainly, comes out in favor of their cause, they get excited about that. You should be ashamed of it. Like, you shouldn't want to be associated with Charlie Sheen, but no, you just bring him on board like it's the best thing since sliced bread. And it was just the only reason you do that is because it gets the numbers, it gets the viewers. And again, you see what the Alex Joneses and his ilk are all about. It's just about getting the most attention.
Yeah.
See where that takes you. It doesn't take you to the truth, I can tell you that much.
But
take that to the bank.
So the 9/11 truth movement, it failed to achieve anything tangible. And then I guess one of the other kind of, I don't know what you call them, like foundations or kind of bedrock memes of the wider truth movement.
The international banking is a big one.
Yeah, that's true.
That's pretty big. The fractional reserve, the whole reserve, banking, the international, the central banks, centralized banks, and the global governance and how banking fits into that and all that.
That's true. That's also true. So you had, I guess, those were the two ones. I mean, if you think about like movements like Zeitgeist, for example, I mean, it was basically 9/11, Federal Reserve, religion, right? So, That film is a perfect example, because those are the three things. Yeah. You get the occult, religious, mystery thing going on. That's the third thing, and that's the thing that nobody can really put their finger on. That's the thing that really bamboozles people. Yeah.
The other two bamboozle people too, but that's the thing that really throws a wrench into stuff. I love that aspect, but also very saddened to see how that gets interpreted.
The way it was interpreted was the interesting part. That was the kicker. But so just to follow this kind of thread through, what I'm talking about is you have these you have these foundational bedrock topics and ideas that the wider truth movement is based on, and after around about 10, 12 years of frantically talking about these things and getting a little bit of mainstream attention, but largely being ignored or ridiculed, we reached the point of 2012. So when we have the whole 2012 thing, I mean, that had been in massive circulation around the alt media circuit, for many, many years. There was so much debate. It was very vague. It was very ambiguous. It was, pretty ridiculous, but it was still something that got a lot of interest and speculation and attention. And I think a lot of people, whether they realized it or not, almost had some kind of a subconscious expectation that there would be some kind of revelation within that year or around that period of time. And so when, again, when nothing happened, I think people were left with a sense of failure, a sense of emptiness. So all of the other topics, 9/11, Federal Reserve, these types of issues, they haven't gone anywhere. This whole 2012 thing, well, that's not happened. And I think when we get into 2013, people were left floundering. I really believe that. I think there was no sense of direction. There was no sense of identity in terms of who we are, where we're going, what we're all about, how can we achieve it. It all started to disintegrate. But it was at that time I noticed that these, I guess what you might call them, like white identity politics or nationalistic politics, and right-wing sentiment started coming in. And this started coming into not just the conspiracy media, but also into mainstream media. And I have cited this before, but I think the TV show Vikings, which came out in 2013, was a big part of this. And, we can perhaps talk about that some other time. But what I saw was that, once the sort of alternative or truth media started to disintegrate in terms of its previous identity, we saw a new identity coming in. And this identity was much more about mainstream sort of pre-existing political sentiments relating to nationalism, relating to conservative social values. And a hatred of the left. And I think that these things continue to grow and expand, and these sort of alternative pundits started connecting with more mainstream pundits. So you had like Alex Jones, people like Paul Joseph Watson, Red Ice. That they were sort of starting to cross-reference like these other mainstream podcasters and online TV outlets like Stephen Crowder or Gavin McInnes or even Joe Rogan, etc. There's a lot of cross-referencing. And it seemed to me that that all of this started to merge into kind of like one set of sentiments and narratives, from about the period of, say, 2013 to 2015, maybe. And lo and behold, once this had become cemented to some degree, and there was a kind of, they had sort of reestablished some kind of consensus regarding what the most important issues of the day were, boom, along comes Trump. So
You know what's interesting? I just thought of this is when the truth movement, 9/11 movement first gained traction, it was during the Bush years, which was 8 years of Bush, a Republican. And you had what was mainly a right-leaning in the alternative movement. Mainly, there's always been the right-wing focus, battling against the system that was ostensibly controlled by the right wing, because you got the Republican president, and that's the way people see things. You got a Republican president, that's a Republican regime, right wing regime. So the anti-establishment had to fight back against its own values in a sense, in that we're the real conservatives, we're the real right wing. These guys are phonies, they're neocons, they're trying to take down the Constitution. The whole spiel. Then you had 8 years of Obama, and then they got to really go like, well, we're the right wing, and that's the right side of politics, and these horrible Democrats that are in power, that's a problem. So they got to kind of join up with the mainstream in that sense, and that the mainstream, of course, is just doing that same thing. That's what they always do. So they got to kind of buddy up with the mainstream in that sense, and then that all leads up into this election. And what's going to happen? I don't know. I'm just saying that I highly doubt Trump's going to win, but if he does, I don't know. I just don't see it. If he doesn't, then that just hatred of the left is just going to continue. And again, you've got the mainstream and the alternative side by side working together. And it's crazy to see how extreme both sides have gone. I mean, the alternative has gone more extreme and crazy, but the mainstream is right there with them, just agreeing with them. It's like, what? What is going on here? And it makes you. I mean, you understand how these fascist regimes can take control in countries. This is how you do it.
Well, it's
not that complicated.
I think the first thing you've got to do is engender a sense of hopelessness and victimhood. And I think this is what's been engendered. I think that, and again, we look back at the transformation of, well, I guess first the disintegration of the wider truth movement, creating a sense of, a loss of identity, a loss of cultural narrative, a loss of, community and purpose. And then, you've got the sort of more mainstream demographics, also being familiarized with the idea that the establishment is corrupt and blah, blah, blah. And I think that these two sort of social phenomena have converged at one point whereby people are crying out for something. They do genuinely feel victimized. They feel hopeless, and history has shown that when people feel hopeless and there's a lot of despair, that this is where the need for a strong masculine leader comes in. And obviously, of course, it always ends up being a horror show. Not that I believe that even if Trump did get in, he would actually do half of the things he said he was going to do.
Yeah, exactly. He's just playing to that.
Yeah.
I mean, every other word is like, it's about strength. It's about how strong Donald Trump is, and it's about how weak everybody else is. They're so weak. And the lengths that he takes his narrative of the strength and weakness thing is so disturbing. It's like, he's really going this far. He's talking about basically, turning the police and these jackbooted thugs that just will kick in the teeth of protesters at rallies if you don't like them, and basically throw them into some secret prison somewhere. And he's got his supporters just cheering this kind of behavior on. It's like, yeah, I do that because I'm a strong leader. We won't have these kinds of people around when I'm in president. Believe me. And like, oh my God. Believe me. It's like, what I don't believe is that people are actually cheering you when you say this. I'm this strength and weakness nonsense. Like, get out of here.
Well, it's just the classic playing on archetypes, masculine, feminine archetypes. You've got the literal manifestation of that in Trump as a male and Hillary as a female. But of course, these are playing on more. Inferred or subtextual emotional archetypes, if you will, where she is about, the social justice narrative, affirmative action, liberal values, of course, and Trump's about strength and,
strong, pushing all the opposition aside and destroying all those like filth that are just ruining everything. Like, all these people are violent out there, and we got to use violence to take them out, more or less, is what he's saying. Well, that's at a very broad sense, but he's saying that in
that's
so
what
many
it is.
ways.
I mean, it's about this. We're going to revive this fictional, romanticized ideal of like traditional Western society. So it's going to be about family values. It's going to be about common sense, and we're going to take a tough stance on crime. And on the other side, you've got Hillary on the left saying, we're about social emancipation. We eliminate the boundaries and borders, and there's the identity politics and the minority groups.
When she could care less, obviously. But, she's just playing into the narrative here that works to get her elected. So. Yeah. Oh, goodness gracious. It is a mess out there. It's the insanity of all sides of this is just, it's hard to handle sometimes. I gotta be quite honest, but I don't know.
It's pushing people into groups. And this gets into some thoughts I have about the management of memes, of movements, of narratives, by the establishment, because what's happening here is that people are basically being goaded into identifying with one group or the other. Whether they actually agree with all of the policies and attitudes of one group or the other is not the point. The point is that, if you sort of tend to lean one way, then you're kind of going to get lumped in with that group. And, that group will then speak for you. And
it's oftentimes not even about you being right. It's about the other side just being wrong, so wrong and so evil. That's what's more important, is how bad the other guy is. Yeah,
absolutely. It's this is again this gets me thinking about the whole notion of how the conspiracy movement has kind of merged into this, and how they've kind of merged with the mainstream, how they've changed their image, how they've become more about comedy, more about entertainment, more about shock value and saying politically incorrect things to get ratings. And by the same token, you've got the kind of hard left on the other side who are kind of seem to be provoking them, by making the most outrageous statements possible. talking about how, we got to kill all white males and all this kind of stuff. And it's just...
Yeah. I mean, does anybody really believe that?
Yeah.
Exactly. Everybody's just saying stuff for shock value.
Yeah, it's all shock value and trying to get your, it's what it is. It's a meme war. Politics has been boiled down to a meme war, a reactionary meme war, which is about basically trolling the other side. It's politics is about trolling now, at least in the mainstream, populist sense of the word anyway.
The problem is, like, it's getting so extreme on both sides. People really are taking this on as an ideology. Like, I'll just say it, the more weak-minded people out there are just like buying into this hook, line, and sinker. And like, if you get some sort of media outlet out there telling you that Hitler's the best thing ever, you're just gonna be like, yeah. If Hitler were around today, he'd be fixing things up. And lo and behold, you're cheering on Donald Trump when he's saying horribly fascist things about what he wants to do with the country. And so people are actually taking this on as a real ideology. That's the danger in things. And
that's the interesting part of it, though. I think it's the most fascinating part of it, is how the alternative crowd, who are all of it, they're railing against the police state and are supporting a guy who wants to implement a bigger police state.
Exactly, that's what they want now. Yeah, they've come completely 180. It's like, well, let's build up that police state to get rid of all the undesirable elements that have created this problem in our mind.
And the same thing goes for
it's unbelievable.
And the same thing goes for like Western imperialism in general. I mean, the whole truth movement, again, as we said, was basically built on the 9/11 truth narrative, and now we're supporting some guy who is talking about, a strong military strength in the Middle East and taking it to our enemies and all this type of stuff.
Bombing the shit out of them.
Yeah.
All this stuff, yeah.
All this kind of stuff. And again, it reminds me of what I was talking about before in regard to the sort of the tracking and the shaping of memes and cultures. And I've got a document from DARPA, so this is a Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency of the Pentagon, where they talk about the social science programs, and they're soliciting, they're putting out a contract and looking for contractors to come forward and take on these social science projects. And one of them is called Social Media and Strategic Communication. And so this is about, again, about the looking at movements online, looking at cultures, demographics, what are they talking about, how do they perceive things, and once we understand those, once we've got all the analytics in place, how do we, go and shape those things? How do we sort of nudge them and put sow new memes into that culture and take them off in a new direction? And so I'm just gonna read off a couple of key kind of key statements that they made. And we can post the links up in the show notes. But in social media and strategic communication, they state that their general goals are, number one, to detect, classify, measure, and track A, the formation, development, and spread of ideas and concepts or memes, and B, purposeful or deceptive messaging and misinformation. Number two, recognize persuasion campaign structures and influence operations across social media sites and communities. Number three, identify participants and intent and measure effects of persuasion campaigns. And number four, counter the messaging of detected adversary influence operations. So this is all put across in the context of combating radicalism. So this is we have to political radicals. Perhaps the far right, or perhaps Islamic extremists. But these techniques.
It just depends who's deemed the enemy and who the radical is. Yeah.
Exactly, and
who are you using it on? Well, who's the radical? Yeah,
and that they say that the technology areas that they were going to deploy for this would be, well, the technological understandings would be, number one, the linguistic cues, patterns of information flow, topic trend analysis, narrative structure analysis, sentiment detection, and opinion mining. Number two, meme tracking across communities, graph analytics and probabilistic reasoning, pattern detection, and, get this, cultural narratives. Number three, inducing identities, modeling emergent communities, trust analytics, and network dynamics modeling. And number four, automated content generation, bots and social media, crowdsourcing.
Oh yeah, I love those. Yeah.
So I mean, you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of the disintegration of the wider truth movement into the alt-right on one hand and the crazy fringe lunatics on the other. Because if you notice, we've talked about this before, but there is no discussion, again, of things like Western imperialism, 9/11, chemtrails, vaccines, GMOs, brainwashing, MK Ultra, all of those sort of top 10 topics that the alternative movement was all about. They've all gone. What you've got now is you've got white identity politics and Trump for the mainstream, with a very small segregated fringe of people who are talking about the flat Earth and the hollow Earth and Nazis in space and blah, 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 blah.
Just the wackiest stuff ever.
Exactly. The stuff that anyone with a brain is going to look at and just, dismiss and ridicule, and rightly so, And it makes me think about how these types of themes and ideas in regard to the crazy stuff, may have been sown, deliberately and promoted deliberately by some of these programs or projects. We talk about automated content generation, bots in social media, crowdsourcing, etc. I mean, I've lost count of how many videos I've seen on YouTube talking about flat Earth. I mean, and I'm thinking to myself, are these people? Do this many people actually believe this? Or is this something that's being put out by the military or the CIA to go viral and to create the illusion that this many people believe this? And to
by the same token, they can use the same technology to promote the white nationalist ultra-right politics too, because maybe that is in a grand strategy works in a sense.
Well,
I mean? You want to think on its face it would, but if you think a little deeper, it does.
Well, I think it does. I think this is a managed strategy of tension, and I think that's exactly what we're talking about. Because if we get back to the idea that this is a meme war, then all you got to do is put reactionary memes out there, and that's very, very easy. If you're working at CIA or DARPA or the FBI or wherever, and you engage in these heavy, deep analytics projects into social media and memes and Twitter and what are people thinking about, what kind of words are they using. It's very easy to understand how you can start steering people's opinions off into new directions by sowing memes and ideas and using certain words on the internet. This could easily apply to pretty much anything, and I think it probably does apply to a lot of things. So, I mean, I tell you what, I'm just going to move on a little bit here because there's another paper very, very similar by DARPA, which is called Narrative Networks. And this is essentially about the same thing, but it goes into a little bit more detail on the idea of memes and the idea of narratives and even how they work on a kind of like neuroscientific or neurobiological scale. But they introduced the concept of narrative networks in saying that narratives exert a powerful influence on human thoughts and behavior. They consolidate memory, shape emotions, cue heuristics and biases in judgment, influence in-group, out-group distinctions, and may affect the fundamental contents of personal identity. It comes as no surprise that because of these influences, stories are important in security contexts. For example, they change the course of insurgencies, frame negotiations, play a role in political radicalization, influence the methods and goals of violent social movements, and likely play a role in clinical conditions important to the military, such as post-traumatic stress disorder. And they say that, they go on to talk about the goals. And, for example, they say that goal 1 is to develop new and extend existing narrative theories in which they will identify the nature of stories, including but not limited to a list of necessary and sufficient conditions that help distinguish narrative stimuli from other stimuli, identify and explore the kinematics and dynamics of a story ontology, identify and explore the structure and function of narratives, including identifying and discussing aspects of narratives that are universal versus aspects that can vary considerably across cultural or social contexts. So, I mean, as you can see here, they're talking about,
it's about telling a story.
Telling a story, putting stories out there, and getting people to believe in stories. I mean, so the point I'm trying to make here, and there's probably a bit of word salad in there, so it's not all that important, but it shows you that the highest levels of the establishment are putting a lot of time, effort, and money into understanding culture, and into understanding ideas and stories and how people think, and not only into understanding them, but into shaping them and taking them off into new directions. And when we look at what's happened here, I think with the alt-right and conspiracy movement going mainstream, I think this is what we're looking at.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, is like, has the establishment pushed the alternative in this direction, or has it been more a case of the alt media doing this to itself? It's certainly both, I believe, and the alt media people who have bought into this and just built this up ought to be ashamed of themselves. It's a crime. It's a crime against the people who are following the alt media and who are part of it, and they're just going along with it because the big names are dragging them along. Now, not that people. I mean, anybody ought to know better, but you get people talking, and again, if you're getting all these memes out there, the narrative is correct, and if you got DARPA and the DoD using the science against you to understand what you're identifying with, how these narratives, why they work on you, then you're a bit at a loss there. So you can't. You feel sad for the common person that is just falling victim in this melee.
Well, I think a lot of it, has to do with crowd psychology and mass psychology, because this is something that's obviously very, very well understood by establishment groups. It's how large groups of people think, and how if a group is going one way, then most people will follow. I think that's what's happening here with alt-right groups and the Trump supporting groups. Is that reason is essentially going out the window. They're going, well, okay, this is where it's all going, and so if this many people are going in this direction, then I guess we better follow. And so if Trump is all of a sudden talking about the need for basically a police state and the need to have a strong military presence in the world and to lock up people and all this type of stuff, then if he echoes my sentiments in terms of how I feel emotionally, and then he says that the necessary response to feeling these emotions is to do A, B, and C. And if a lot of people are supporting him in that, then I guess they must be right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's happening.
This equation that my mind's recognizing this equation, there's only one way to solve it. So, I mean, what do you want my opinion to be? This is the only way it can work. So that's if you get this down to science, that's how it operates.
Yeah.
But what's interesting to me is that, again, you take the truth movement back a few years and how they were so distressed about martial law, police state coming in, the government taking control, putting everybody into FEMA camps, all this stuff. And it's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy in many different ways. It's like, well, in one sense, the alt-right, the alternative, just in general, is becoming so extreme and reactionary that I could see where they actually start getting violent, and then the system actually does start using all these terror laws and stuff against them. But on the other hand, you've got the alt-right promoting this guy who kind of wants to enact a police state on their own behalf. So it's like, hey, look, we've been talking about this police state that's supposed to happen for years. We're going to make this thing happen one way or another. We're either going to be in control of it, or we're going to go out in a blaze of glory, just screaming at the top of our lungs, and we're going to go into these FEMA camps and like it because we told you everything we told you was the truth, right? And that's one way of putting it.
It's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, we could look at all these Alex Jones documentaries about the police state and the global elite and the big end game and all this kind of stuff as being predictive programming, as being something that's really just familiarizing people with the concept that this is going to happen, so that when it does happen, they're like, oh, well, it's inevitable. But
I've been waiting for this.
There's also a tendency among most people, and especially among political groups, to, not really so much stand in opposition to tyranny, but rather stand in opposition to the fact that they're not part of it, and this goes for people like the alt-right, because it goes for the left as well, because it's not so much that we have a problem with what you're doing, it's we have a problem with the fact that we're going to be victimized by what you're doing. And now, if we were in control, we wouldn't have a problem with it. We look at this and with people who are interested or identify with leftist ideals or Marxist ideology is especially when we look at the sort of upper levels of the intelligentsia, it's not so much that they oppose whatever it is they're opposing, but more that they oppose not being a part of it. It's not that we oppose an elite; it's that we want to be the elite ourselves. And this is the same thing that's happening with the alt-right. It's what they've gone from, the conspiracy movement, standing in opposition to big government, big establishment, corruption, all globalism, whatever, imperialism, etc. It's gone from that to, right, well, you know what, if we can't end that, then I guess we better join in. It's kind of like if you can't beat him, join him type thing. And so
and then there's another one that's like you become what you fear.
Well, you do.
That's another thing. Yeah,
you become and this is a this is a truism that's as old as human race itself. You always become what you hate. If you're not looking at yourself, if you're not questioning, like, what am I doing here? Am I doing this? Am I guilty of this? Then you'll become it. And
you're subconsciously hating it because it's an aspect of yourself that you haven't dealt with.
Well, that's
you're not about to deal. If you just keep yelling about it, you're not dealing with it.
That's it.
It's just there, and you're going to fulfill it. And somehow it's like, I'm not dealing with it. That's what I want to. It's my fault. I'm just going to see through till the end. Because,
that's it. Well, I mean, this is it. This is an axiom of the human condition. Is like anything that you feel strong feelings of hatred towards. Generally speaking, those, as like you say, they're simply parts of yourself that you haven't been able to integrate into the conscious mind yet. Hence the frustration and the anger. So.
Yes, and look at how much anger, fear, and frustration that the alt and the mainstream right and just that whole mess and what the alt media has become. It's just become just a cesspool for the worst, the absolute worst, like the fear, the hate. It's. I mean, what good is going to come of that? I mean, what do you think is going to happen?
Yeah,
it's not good. It's not good. What's happening?
Well, it all it all stems from this kind of, again, this victim identity thing, and it's we brought this up when we were talking about that film Imperium that we reviewed with Jay Dyer.
Oh yeah,
they made a note of that, and they said
film.
that it was good. They said that the route to understanding fascism is victimhood. This is how it starts. It starts with victimhood, and that is true, but it's also true.
Yes.
Of the left and of anybody else, in fact, anybody in between.
Yes.
It all starts with victimhood. It starts with a sense of being disenfranchised, disempowered.
Any tyrannical authoritarian system will come out of that.
Yeah.
There's sort of deep-seated needs in people that aren't dealt with, and then it comes out on a macrocosmic scale.
Well,
so
it does, and we see it. We see it in the alt-right, whereby they are railing against victim culture on the left, and rightly so to a degree, because it's a lot of the stuff that's coming out of these college campuses, a lot of what we're seeing as being the future of our intellectual culture is insane. It is crazy.
Yeah.
And it is worrisome. But, the response to that has been to adopt a victim mentality within the alt-right, where they are now looking for things to be offended about. If you look at a lot of these popular alt-right platforms, I mean, obviously Red Ice being a big one, there's a number of others. That's all they do. They're basically looking, they're scouring the internet for guests, for news articles that paint white people as victims, and that's all they're talking about. So it's not so much victimhood.
Yeah, and they go out of their way with those articles to pick them. I mean, if you don't see that, I mean, you're blind. You're blind. They are cherry picking stuff to make it look to just paint that picture of the white identity, race politics game. They're drawing into that as like, oh look, these minorities killed a white person. It's like, okay, I could pull up a story that's the opposite if you really wanted me to. You're just picking the story that works for your silly narrative. And again, we're back on the narrative again.
Yeah, that's right.
It's all about what narratives are you promoting? What idea of the world are you putting out there? You can make people think anything.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the truth. And part of the big problem in the entire world, as I see it, is that people don't understand the power of the subjective reality, what our life is as a human being. It's, I mean, to me, it's almost mainly about your subjective reality of the way you see the world, because you get to control that. You get to say, like, I see the world in this way or that way. And then no matter what the objective truth is all around you, for you, that's the way the world is. And that means everything to you and your entire life.
Well, that's all
and just, that's like such a simple, like, not complex idea. And yet it's just, it evades the import of that, just evades us at every turn. We're not bringing it back to those basics.
No, because the subjective experience is all you will ever actually have. That's all you'll ever actually have. You'll never have anything outside of your own subjective experience. So, I mean, not to get
everything.
like egocentric about it, but that it really is the only truth that you can ever know, is your own personal truth. But this is what is being destroyed through these narratives that are being built up. And of course, again, this goes for both the right and the left. For example, the alt-right media is, as you say, cherry-picking all these stories about the victimization of white people. And so that creates a story, it creates a narrative, it creates public perception that white people are victims, hence all the support. And so people who watch those things are getting confirmation of what they want to believe. And
like, oh, look, I was right.
Yeah, exactly. And so conversely, this happens on the left as well. They are looking for stories where people are being discriminated against or victimized or are suffering prejudice or what have you. And so because they're cherry picking all of those stories, they're telling that narrative, and that is, generates support, and that shapes people's worldview. And so it is interesting, and it's glaringly obvious that this is happening, but this is how media works. This is what it's all about, is managing perception, through the omission of certain facts.
It's creating narratives, but by the very nature of media, that's what you're doing. You're creating a story. And it's a news story. If it's, people take news as objective, it's nothing of the sort. They tell you it's a news story, right? Yeah. Well, I read story books to my kids, don't I? I mean, what's the difference? There is none. There really is none when you think about it.
Reminds me of the film Nightcrawler, which we should probably review at some point in the future.
We need to. I absolutely love that film. It's so good.
Fantastic.
We need to go over that.
In fact, let's do that soon, shall we? We'll do it soon.
Yeah, we should.
But there's that fantastic scene where the what's the actress's name? She's like the head of the newsroom, the news corporation.
Oh,
whatever.
yeah, the older woman that kind of seduces or whatever.
Yeah, I've forgotten her name, but anyway, so the you've got the Stringer, the Jake Gyllenhaal character going out and getting all this footage of of murders and car crashes and all this type of stuff, and he's taking it back to her, and she's explaining to him that she is creating a narrative, that she says to him, what I want is a white woman running down the street with her throat cut, fleeing a black assailant or something like that.
And
it was something like that. I'm paraphrasing, but it was something like that. And so I just thought that was incredible, because it shows you, how these narratives and stories are fabricated. The narrative of outrage, the narrative of victimhood, is being fabricated every day by people who are in the business of doing that, and so everybody's being told that things are that bad, and that we need strong response to this,
Yes. Yeah,
it's a story.
Well, just the local cable news in and of itself has gone a long way in just building up, really ruining people's perception of the everyday world, and just doing horrible disservice to humanity over the years that it's come to prominence. And that's a crying shame right there. And that's why the film Nightcrawler is so good, because it intelligently and effectively criticizes that on so many levels. Yeah. It's great. Well done.
Yeah.
Creators of that one.
Good job. We will definitely cover that soon. But but this is it. This is how it works. It's not to say that there aren't certain issues that need to be addressed or looked at or deconstructed or what have you. And of course, both sides of every argument have always got a point. That there is truth in everything. Yeah. It's not that it's all patently false or true. It's that there are elements of truth within everything, and these truths are made up of objective facts and subjective experiences, but you're looking at a much more complex picture than simply one side or the other.
Yeah, everybody wants it's almost like there's so much information overload that people need to break it down to the most basic narrative they can find.
Well, that is interesting.
And then that brings it back to identity politics. Well, I'm a white guy, I'm being victimized, or you go on the left side, it's the opposite thing. So it just breaks all the insanity information overload down to the simple answer, like, oh, thank God, that's what I needed.
Well, that's a really interesting way of looking at it, because I think this is also a big part of it as well, is that we live in an age of total information like saturation and overload. There's you go on the internet and you can just get lost. You get lost in a world that is bigger than the world around you in so many ways.
And it can take over your mind too.
Yeah.
It can take over your mind just as your own mind, if it's not watched over diligently, can do to itself. If you don't sit there and monitor your own thoughts and where your mind is straying, your mind will just flow along anywhere, and you'll just get lost. Well, the internet is kind of a way of the internet's doing that for you, and it's distracting you so that your mind doesn't make its own distractions. And it takes things to even crazier levels, and somebody else is out there writing narratives to lead your mind in all these different crazy directions, and you just go with it. If you're not consciously aware of how much nonsense you're actually reading, if you're not able to read between the lines and tell that bare minimum the people writing these stories are just trying to get your attention, they're just attention seeking attention seekers, charlatans, they don't care. That's bare minimum. And it gets worse from there. I mean, what is it? Do they just want attention or make money or, draw attention to whatever group they're a part of? Or is there something more nefarious? Well, either way, it's something bad. But if you don't see that, then you can be led right down the primrose path.
And it's so easy. It's like you say, I've done little, I guess you might call them thought experiments in the past, just to monitor how I myself internally respond to this kind of stimulus. One time I was feeling, it was just a sort of a regular day for me. It was a regular morning. I was feeling okay and having a coffee and everything. And I decided to just watch a little bit of Alex Jones, and this is going back maybe 4 or 5 years. And I put just, his regular show on the internet, and I watched it, and his regular outrage. And honestly, within 5 minutes of watching that show, my heart rate had shot up, and I was feeling anxious and angry. And anxious, I noticed that I was like, wow, this was it happened so fast, and it happened in a way that I couldn't even, I didn't even see it happening. It was just all of a sudden.
It's almost masterfully done the way they do it. It's like, man, they know every button to push. They know what they're doing. Well, they've been doing it so long. They know all the little techniques. I've done the same thing too. It's like, man, I can see how this draws people in, because it grabs you at this gut level where it makes you anxious and nervous, and then you're going, oh God, well, how do I make this feeling go away? And they keep telling you well, yeah, we got the answers, it's going to do it. But all they do is just continue that feeling of helplessness. Is essentially all they're doing.
Yeah. And that's what it's all based on, is based on engendering a sense of helplessness, and that's exactly, that was my experience of that kind of little experiment there, was all of a sudden feeling helpless. And I'm like, oh my God, the world is about to end, the sky is about to fall, and there's nothing I can do about it. And that's pure psychological warfare. That is absolute number one. It's an info war.
I've been told that there's a war on for your mind. Somebody said that. Can't quite remember it, though. I don't know. Doesn't matter. Who cares?
Let's have a look at Jacques Ellul here, because he talks about this in the book Propaganda: The Formation of Men's Attitudes, which I know you have read, I think.
Yeah, I got that one on my bookshelf. It's got a nice pink cover. Doesn't get much better than that. I love that bright pink color there. Beautiful.
Yeah. So this is on pages 46 to 47. He's talking about the characteristics of propaganda, and he says, to the extent that propaganda is based on current news, it cannot permit time for thought or reflection. A man caught up in the news must remain on the surface of the event. He is carried along in the current, and can at no time take a respite to judge and appreciate. He can never stop to reflect. There is never any awareness of himself, of his condition, of his society, for the man who lives by current events. Such a man never stops to investigate at any one point, any more than he will tie together a series of news events. We have already mentioned man's inability to consider several facts or events simultaneously and to make a synthesis of them in order to efface or oppose them. One thought drives away another, old facts are chased by new ones. Under these conditions, there can be no thought. And in fact, modern man does not think about current problems, he feels them. He reacts, but he does not understand them any more than he takes responsibility for them. He is even less capable of spotting any inconsistency between successive facts. Man's capacity to forget is unlimited. And that's how it works. You know, and he talks about the current. You know, it's like being swept along a stream. You know, you're moving along with everybody else. You're moving along in a sea of thoughts and ideas and people and information. And at no time do you actually, you know, unless you step out of that river and see it for what it is, you know, you'll never really understand what's happening.
And interesting to note that the bigger that this message gets, the more dangerous it is. And here again is the irony of the truth movement in trying to spread the word to the farthest reaches. Was they're just spreading their propaganda and making just making things worse, because people just fall into whatever these narratives are, and you keep simplifying the narratives to make them more palatable to the masses. And then again, you're going to catch up inconsistencies. Well, you're going to call out the masses for being brainwashed and idiots. Well, you're trying to appeal to them, right? Again, I mentioned this before, but it's just, this is one thing that kills me with these alt-right guys. The pundits are like, those stupid brainwashed masses. I have 5 million YouTube views today. Well, I want to reach through the screen and slap you, but I can't. I guess it's better this way. But anyway, I'm getting a bit tired here. To be quite honest. I mean, I think I'm losing my mind talking about reaching through computer screens.
I think we've got an episode of the X-Files happening here.
Yeah.
It's a complex, convoluted, worrying topic to talk about, and there's so many different aspects of it. You know, there are, you know, so many things we could talk about, so many things we have talked about. But I think the most interesting part of it all is really that what was once the truth movement, or the alternative media scene, if you will, is now basically the Trump movement. I mean, you know, even if people don't say that they would necessarily identify with Trump, or that they actually support all of his policies, he has now, for better or worse, become the vanguard of that sentiment. You know, so the person who represents those feelings is now Donald Trump. You know, and because he does that, you know, people who don't necessarily agree with him on everything will follow him and would support him, you know, over Hillary. And you know, I can't blame them in a lot of ways, but
you know what? I actually, and this is an opinion that's been growing on me. I actually wish that Trump would win, because in a way it would put an end to this madness, and it would force Trump to do something about everything he said. Like, okay, you know, all this talk, let's see what it was really about. You be president and see what happens. And maybe, like, yeah, of course it wouldn't be as bad as he said it would, or either that, or it would be horrible. And it just proved that all his supporters were just closet fascists. They'll take their little positions in whatever capacity they get. It will prove give the alternative crowd a chance to prove themselves. But you know, that's not what it's about. The alternative always has to lose. They always have to be angry about something. So therefore, I'm going to predict that Trump loses. I'm going to go even further and say that that's what he wanted all along. I honestly hope that the opposite happens, but I really don't think so. I think he wants to lose, and that just plays into this whole big scheme. Things are going to go on business as usual.
Yeah, I think so. And I think this is a piece of theater. I think, you know, however this has happened, I think we're talking about the long-term control of political and social movements, you know, being guided into what we're seeing now. You know, I think this is basically about lowering the standard of people's expectations in terms of politics. You know, when we've got such a horrific choice of candidates in the election, and I guess lowering people's intellectual standards as well. And what had previously been the self-appointed vanguard of critical thinking and the truth movement, if you want to, call it that, is now going along with, this idiot, thinking that he's going to say things. And
and a billionaire, that's anti-establishment, isn't it? It's rich billionaire. I can't think of anything more anti-establishment than that.
Well, this is it. I mean, I think again, you've got the failure of the truth movement to accomplish anything, the sense of loss that came from that, and then the answer, the solution, the ready-made identity, the ready-made narrative that's simple, it's definitive. And
it can gain traction in the mainstream.
Traction in the mainstream.
That's
I think people are just
the most important thing with the mainstream. What you can do, how you can affect the mainstream. Even though you're alternative and you hate the mainstream, it's all about what you can do in the mainstream.
Yeah.
So just that contradiction right there has brought about so many problems. Like it's this, if you're talking about identity politics, well, what is your identity really?
Yeah, other than being famous and popular.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's the truth, and thus the dialectic makes sense. Then it's like, well, yeah, it's all about attention to you personally, and you're just dragging along thousands and millions of people in the wake of your rise to fame. So yeah,
and I think
that's a virtue.
I think I have a little bit more sympathy for people who have been dragged into this because I know how sophisticated propaganda is. But it's the people who are leading this charge, which I have got the most suspicion about. And again, we go back to ideas like DARPA's narrative networks and CIA counterintelligence. I actually tend to think that some of these pundits and leaders of this kind of alt-right movement have actually been, deliberately trying to sabotage it in some way, either consciously, semi-consciously, or what have you. I think
they could have been pushed. They could have also been pushed to this by all these bots showing them what was popular, and they're just going with that. Oh, that's what's popular, so we'll follow that. But all the while, it was the DoD pushing you there.
Yeah, so like the DoD bots sow the memes. The big pundits pick up on those memes. They repeat the memes. Their followers then believe in those memes, and a narrative is created. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, they fall right into the trap. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think I was just going to just quickly carry on another paragraph here from the propaganda, because he goes on to say, just after that paragraph I just read before, he said that this situation, referring to the current propaganda, makes the current events man a ready target for propaganda. Indeed, such a man is highly sensitive to the influence of present-day currents. Lacking landmarks, he follows all currents. He is unstable because he runs after what happened today. He relates to the event and therefore cannot resist any impulse coming from that event. Because he is immersed in current affairs, this man has a psychological weakness that puts him at the mercy of the propagandists. No confrontation ever occurs between the event and the truth. No relationship ever exists between the event and the person. Real information never concerns such a person. What could be more striking, more distressing, more decisive than the splitting of the atom, apart from the bomb itself? And yet this great development is kept in the background, behind the fleeting and spectacular result of some catastrophe or sports event, because that is the superficial news that the average man wants. Propaganda addresses itself to that man. Like him, it can only relate to the most superficial aspect of a spectacular event, which alone can interest man and lead him to make a certain decision or adopt a certain attitude. So, again, he's just talking about how easy it is for people to get dragged along on that current, to have no real deconstruction of it, to have the intellectual sort of examination of it, and just to feel it,
And current events, just going with the current events. I mean, what are these alt media sites doing? They just take the latest event and they just say how it's horrible. It's like, well, I think of this Blues Brothers scene sometimes where the Nazis are holding a rally. They go, the Jew is using the black as a weapon against you, something like that. And I just feel like some of the elements of the alternative crowd are like sounding like that now. It's like, wow, it's those goofy characters from the Blues Brothers holding a Nazi rally. in that comedy movie is what they become. But again, yeah, they're following current events, and it's just like, this was staged, or it was fake, and it was faked by the liberal left that are. It just becomes that. It's just like, this was we get the immediate answer that fits the alternative point of view, ready to go for this event that happened 2 minutes ago. And we're going to pretend like we know all the ins and outs of this, that this is the truth, when it's not. We're just acting like that. We haven't, looked into any facts or anything, because we don't have to.
Yeah, exactly. This is it.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think about winding this thing up just about now?
Yeah. I've been up almost 20 hours on end now.
Wow.
Okay. I'm getting a little cuckoo.
Uh-oh. Yep. Crazy time. But
yeah.
It's been an interesting conversation. We could go on forever and ever and ever, because there's so many different aspects of all this. But I just think, again, to just hammer home the point that I intuitively feel, and for good reason, with some of the references and documents we've talked about here today, that this is a guided strategy of conflict. That people are being guided into adopting a strategy of conflict, and this is about furthering division, furthering polarization, and creating a tension that can be capitalized upon by the establishment as usual. Things like, again, we talked about the just the complete reversal and inversion of previous values, and how easily that's happened. And I think, I mean, it shows you how easily people are led.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to finish off by one more quote here. It's from Karl Rove, which is George Bush's aide. He was one of these.
He got confronted big time recently by Alex Jones, like a few months back. Man, he really let him have it. That was good.
We'll have to look that one up. And
it was all a part of the election nonsense too when this happened. They were both like flying to the Republican convention or something, and Alex Jones just kept pestering Karl Rove, and just the same old confrontation nonsense. And
what Alex Jones and his ilk seem to overlook is what Karl Rove said in this 2004 interview with the journalist. He said, they're talking about how they're in what they call the reality-based community, and it's all about studying reality, studying memes, ideas, stories, news events, and basing all of your sort of policies and judgments on that. And he said we're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality, judiciously as you will, we'll act again, creating other new realities, which you can study too. And that's how things will sort out. We're history's actors, and you, all of you, will be left to just study what we do. And I think that just about sums it up.
What's funny? Alex Jones was confronting him on that exact thing.
Well,
he literally was bringing up that quote. He's like, look, this, he says he creates reality. But yeah, of course, he's just falling into that, and falling into the trap, and he's acting like he's not.
Well, again,
my gosh.
what's Alex Jones doing? He's just, he says, all of you can study what we do, and you'll become part of that reality. Yeah. Your interest in what we say becomes real. And then the interest of your followers in what you say becomes real. And so we create reality. And I think that's what's happened with this whole election fiasco and all the nonsense around it. So, but like you, I also So I was just going to say, like you, I also secretly wish Trump will win just to see what will happen.
Yeah.
Just to see what will happen.
I think it would be a safer outcome, because I think it would get the alternative crowd that's behind him to settle down a little bit, especially if Trump turns out to be a disaster, like, oh man, he sucked all along. This is the guy we were for. Either that, or again, the other version where he just goes full on more than you even expected, and they just become the little fascists that they've always been. They get to be more out in the public about it, because that becomes the establishment. They become the establishment. Hey, congratulations, you got the attention of everybody. That's what you wanted. Hey, good. The truth wins, right? Your version of truth wins. So success for everybody in that case, I say. But I really don't see Trump winning. I really don't.
I think it'll be a victory for Clinton, a very depressing, kind of just by the skin of her teeth victory. And I think there'll probably be outrage from the alt-right and the Trump supporters. And I think that will be the platform on which to launch this whole Trump TV thing and the alt-right getting on the bandwagon. Yep. And this will be the cause for the next however long, for the whole of, the conspiracy media and alt-right and whoever else. They can all rally around this for the next year or what have you.
If we're lucky, it'll just be 4 years of Hillary, and then at least a Republican will come in after that. But oh God, I shudder to think about 8 years of Hillary.
God,
it's going to be bad in lots of different ways, and all these right wing people are going to start doing really, really terrible things. My gosh, that's a whole other thing. We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, I do think though within a few elections, so like give it 8 years, 12 years, 16 years, however long, I think it's going to be reduced down to like this idiocracy scenario where you've just got two celebrities battling it out. You'll have George Clooney with Matt Damon as vice president going up against like Alex Jones, and whoever else, and they'll go into like a gladiatorial arena and like wrestle each other or something. I mean, that's where it's heading. That's what the last election the debate was like. So I can only go in that direction from now. It can only go down.
Gosh.
But anyway, we better wind this one up. So you can get the podcast on the RSS is on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Google Play, and TuneIn. You can get the website, which is tmpodcast.com. We also have the YouTube channel, which is Themes and Memes Podcast, and you can also get us on Twitter at Themes Memes. Is there anything else you wanted to add, Aaron?
Mm-hmm. Well, you better follow us, because until we reach 1 million subscribers, we're a bunch of worthless, and we're not promoting the truth properly. So come on, millions of people. We're trying to spread the truth here. You better get to it. Hop on this truth train. Otherwise, how are we going to spread the good word?
Yeah, and how the hell...
That's all I got to say about this.
How the hell are we supposed to get our sponsorship dollars unless we got a lot of followers, Aaron?
I know. I don't know. I haven't figured that out yet. That's why we have to get the million.
We are being sponsored by like APAC or something like that, apparently. So,
Yeah. So help us out, would you?
Yeah.
See, at least we're being honest to our audience. We're just being outright pushy with them. See, we're being honest. We're truthful. See, that's what I'm going with here.
Yeah, and we shall continue to do that as well.
Expect no less from us.
Yeah. Great talking to Aaron. I shall see you next time.
Yep. Look forward to it. Take care.
Bye. This podcast was recorded on the 30th of October 2016.